Welcome into the Inside Carolina podcast. This is a massive, special, emergency podcast. 2022 five-star defensive tackle Travis Shaw is a Tar Heel committed to UNC on Saturday night around 6 p.m. at Grimsley High School. The number 4 ranked player in the nation, the number 2 ranked defensive lineman, the best player in the state of North Carolina, is now a member of UNC's 2022 class. I'm Ross Martin. This is the Inside Carolina podcast, a special edition of the Scoop podcast. I'm joined by Don Callahan. Don, off the bat, let's get some takes. Travis Shaw, the biggest recruit in this class for UNC, has picked the Tar Heels.
Yeah, I mean, this is huge on so many different levels. From, obviously you're adding one of the best defensive linemen in the nation to UNC's commitment list and eventually their roster, but also you're beating Clemson, which has been a nemesis of North Carolina's in the state of North Carolina and overall when it comes to recruiting. If you want to say North Carolina beat Tony Grimes, North Carolina beat Clemson for Tony Grimes, I'm not going to argue with you. I think that was Clemson kind of dropped the ball early on and wasn't a factor later on. This one, Clemson was definitely a factor to the very end. Clemson and Georgia, and the fact that North Carolina beat those two programs for this 5-star guy is absolutely huge. Also, slightly Marvin Alston kind of edges Shaw as UNC's best all-time commitment. Obviously, that could change between now and signing day based off a lot of different things. So this is one of North Carolina's top recruits ever, even not including the internet era.
Yeah, we're going to get into it all here on the special edition of the Scoop podcast. I mean, that's the big thing. UNC went head-to-head with Clemson, which is a national power and one of the best football programs in the country when it comes to recruiting, and Georgia, and you have the program that tried to get in there for Shaw, and they landed Travis Shaw, the 6'5", listed at 310, maybe bigger than that.
Yeah, he's bigger than that.
And they snag Shaw from down the road at Grimsley High School in Greensboro, North Carolina. I think it's important that they landed the in-state guy, the best player in the state. That's always huge for appearances. That's what Mac Brown's tried to do since he got back. So they're continuing to lock down these borders. They've missed out on some of the top recruits and like the number 1, number 2 recruits in past seasons. Right now, as we sit right now, they have the top recruit in Travis Shaw. So that's big for appearances. And again, beating Clemson and beating Georgia head to head. Let's go through some things. Additionally, I mean, what does it mean from a broader standpoint for UNC recruiting?
If you look at what North Carolina has done along the defensive line ever since Mac Brown became head coach again, it's been super impressive. I mean, you've seen some of the some of that kind of take fruition on the actual roster. We'll see a lot of those guys this football season, but this kind of continues that with getting Shaw. And actually, even though all those guys, Jahvaree Ritzie, Keyshawn Silver, I mean, those are really, really good players. Shaw's better than all those guys as a prospect. And that's just the upside he has. I mean, he definitely has first round potential, first NFL draft first round potential. So to get a guy like him and to kind of continue that string of elite is I feel like is an understatement. Defensive linemen and adding those to the roster is impressive.
Yeah, UNC is stacking defensive linemen. You look back to what they did with kind of Miles Murphy, Kedrick Bingley-Jones, Clyde Pender, that class, and then top that with Keyshawn Silver and Jahvaree Ritzie, who I think will have an impact as true freshmen this season and certainly kind of lay the groundwork for very talented defensive linemen for many years to come. I mean, I think Ritzie and Keyshawn have a chance to be superstars. Ritzie might have more of an impact as a freshman than we expect. And then you land, the biggest one yet, a massive player in Travis Shaw. It's huge, and that's what you want to do, stack really talented 4- and 5-star players at that position. And it's one of the most important positions for football when it comes to, I mean, offensive line, defensive line, quarterback, I would say are probably the top 3 positions where you want your most talent. And so UNC is kind of beginning to be set there for not just the coming years, but 3-4 years into the future. Let's move along with his recruitment. We're gonna get to more of Travis Shaw as a player and get Don's analysis here in a bit. But let's quickly go into his recruitment. We've talked about this for so long. Don, what really happened for him to pick UNC today?
So a lot of things happened in June, which is the case for a lot of recruits, the 2022 recruits. And so midway through June, he took a visit to Clemson, and then he started to kind of set up official visits, one to North Carolina, one to Georgia. In the middle of setting that up, he decided, you know what? I know what schools I like. I'm down to these 3 schools, North Carolina, Georgia, and Clemson. And so he was going to proceed as such with kind of like, he kind of wanted to get it done during the summer, but wasn't sure he was going to be able to. Then he comes out of June, having taken those visits. Then he goes into July, and you have that last week of July where you could take visits. He started off with Clemson's all-in cookout, and then the last day before the dead period, Georgia and North Carolina had cookouts of their own. He chose North Carolina. He told me later on it was because of proximity. You could take, if that was the case, I'm sure the fact that maybe he was leaning that direction, or maybe his family was leaning that direction, might have factored into that a little bit. But that, in hindsight, seems to be that was kind of the blow that gave North Carolina this commitment ultimately, because from what he said afterwards, he convened with his family members and they talked things over, and then they just realized, hey, North Carolina's a spot, and that led to him scheduling the announcement ceremony on Saturday.
Okay, so he had the official to Georgia, the official Carolina, the official to Georgia, a visit to Clemson.
Yeah, and it was important to remember. So Clemson does not host official visits, so it was a weekend visit that was basically an official visit. Only he had to pay for everything.
Yeah, it served as kind of that summer official, but it was an unofficial visit. So he visited Clemson one time this summer.
Yes.
Okay, and then he visited UNC for an official. I think he visited another time in June, right?
He did. He came up
Okay.
For a visit also.
And then he visited again when things opened back up in July, including a visit to Clemson.
Yes.
And then the last visit was a big that cookout for.
And what's also important to point out, and obviously we had this massive dead period that was 14 months. Prior to that dead period, he visited both Clemson and Georgia, but he made countless trips to North Carolina just to hang out. And I think obviously those visits laid the groundwork for him to feel comfortable at North Carolina, and I think kind of helped later on. There were kind of the body blows early in a boxing match, whereas, they set up that knockout punch, which was the Carolina cookout.
Yeah, and this goes back to how close Greensboro is to Chapel Hill. I make that drive all the time. It's a 1-hour drive from downtown Greensboro to downtown Chapel Hill. It's easy. It's an easy day trip, and that familiarity and being able to visit campus multiple times obviously played a role in his recruitment. Probably a family situation where his mom and family and friends and coaches can make that trip a little bit easier than, say, a Georgia or a Clemson. And then UNC's ability to get him on campus so many times certainly played a role, and that's why you want to keep kids in state, and it's easier to recruit kids who are in state. And like Mac Brown says, players are more likely to commit to in-state schools and be more comfortable if they commit to in-state schools. This is a massive recruitment, something we've been tracking for so long, and for UNC to land Travis Shaw right now is huge. Okay, so what do you think changed, or what happened, and what went into the decision to kind of put UNC over the edge? We know how the visits went. We know kind of it was neck and neck with Clemson and Carolina. He made multiple visits to each this summer, and you have to realize how persuasive a visit to Clemson can be. So what happened on that last visit, or over June and July, that put UNC over the edge for 5-star Travis Shaw?
I just think it was his family felt comfortable. One of the I interviewed him just before he announced the date for his ceremony, and he talked a bunch. We talked for about 15 minutes, but the quote that I was able to pull out that I felt was the most telling was, he said he felt comfortable at all 3 schools, but his family only felt comfortable at one. And so obviously it's a lot easier for his family to go to the Carolina cookout. I heard that many family members, not just his his mom and uncle and siblings, but a lot of family members came with him. And I think that just played a role. They felt comfortable there, and they expressed that to him when they reconvened after all those visits to discuss what direction they wanted to go with his recruitment.
Who led UNC's recruitment of Shaw?
Lonnie Galloway and Tim Cross kind of teamed up for this. Cross is probably the leader. Galloway is the area recruiter. So area recruiters typically do different things, but he was definitely involved. But I mean, really, you had Jay Bateman was involved. Mac Brown was involved in this. I mean, this was like an all hands on deck sort of situation for obvious reasons.
Of course, and a huge get for Cross and Galloway. Okay, so let's get into the type of player. We talked a little bit about, how he impacts the depth chart of the defensive line, how UNC is stacking that elite 4 and 5-star talent on the defensive front. UNC runs a 3-4. They want the biggest bodies, the 3 biggest humans they can find. Jay Bateman has said to play those 3 down linemen. You have a nose tackle. You have more of an edge. I think it's called an edge player, and then a tackle, right?
Yeah, so you have the 3 down linemen.
Yeah.
One
nose,
of them is
tackle,
nose.
and edge.
Yeah, and the two ends are 4 techniques. One is called, I think one's called a defensive end, the other one's called a defensive tackle. But
defensive end, yeah. I'm saying edge. I meant
they both are essentially the same position.
Yeah, cut that, John. Just kidding. All right, so where do you think he's going to play first? And let's get into the type of player, what he brings, the intangibles, the physical traits, and what you've seen from him in tape review and watching him in person.
Well, he's a disruptive nose tackle on North Carolina system. And he's a guy that he's a plug and play guy because he already has the size. I mean, obviously he's going to progress more. And once he gets better conditioned, kind of lose some of that baby fat sort of thing. But I think he's so talented that even before his body completely transforms, he's going to play. So I expect him to play as a true freshman. And ultimately, he's going to be that disruptive force up the middle. That's going to be very difficult for offenses. I mean, you're going to have to double team him at least if you're the offensive coordinator. And the thing about him is that he's a very large human being. We talked about he's 6'5", 310. That's where he's listed. And that's probably the last time he was measured, which was probably 2 years ago. So we're probably talking about someone who's, I would say he's over 330, to be honest. But he has an extensive basketball background, which we've seen in the past that allows even big guys like him to have unbelievable feet. So he's super light on his feet despite his size. You combine that nimbleness with that size and that power, and it's just unreal. And the beauty of him is there are a lot of defensive line prospects that have that combination, that have the size, have the nimbleness, but they haven't performed to their capabilities yet in the high school level. You throw on his film or you go to one of his games. I mean, you've seen it. They went to the state championship with having him on the defensive line. And he definitely plays like a superstar, which is a huge, huge item that needs to be mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen him play a couple times. I've seen him in person. Massive butt. We're talking massive butt and thighs, super big lower section, and he's long. I mean, he's 6'5", 6'6". He's a massive human being, as you said. He played a lot on the edge this season for Grimsley, state champion Grimsley Whirlies, because I think they wanted him to kind of be able to get to the quarterback more and have more disruptive ability on the edge. But you see him as a nose, which makes sense. He's going to slim down. He's going to trim some of that fat and put on a lot of muscle. I mean, can you imagine what UNC strength and conditioning coach Brian Hess can do with that body? I mean, it's going to be incredible when he's actually in a collegiate strength and conditioning program. He's going to be so strong and so massive there. And just like you said, they have to double team him because he's so long. He has that pass rushing ability in the middle, and he has that length. He's not just a squatty, fat nose tackle. He's an athletic, long nose tackle who also has that size and power in the middle. It can really be disruptive right there in the nose position. All right, Don, looking at our notes here, is there anything else you want to touch on with Travis Shaw?
I think we touched on everything.
That wraps it up. All right, guys, we appreciate you listening to the Inside Carolina podcast, the special edition of The Scoop. 2022 5-star defensive tackle Travis Shaw becomes a Tar Heel commit in the class of 2022. 6'5", 310 plus, number 4 player in the nation, number 2 defensive tackle. And as it stands right now, Shaw is, of course, the highest ranked player in UNC's 2022 recruiting class. They now have 13 commitments and will likely, obviously, move up in the rankings when all is said and done with this. It's a massive commitment. I mean, I think it's the biggest commitment that I've seen covering UNC. It ranks up there with the likes of course, Marvin Austin and Tony Grimes last year, with just the ranking ability and the importance to UNC's football future. Anything else, Don? We good?
We're good.
All right, guys. Appreciate you listening.